Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Alex Paul from InvestorStream, and I'll be your host today. Today, we have Agia Resources Managing Director, Fernando Tallarico, and Non-Executive Chair, Christina McGrath, who will provide an in-depth update on the company's copper assets, headlined by the promising Andrade project in southern Brazil. Following the presentation, both Fernando and Christina will address any questions you may have pertaining to the copper assets, and we'll attempt to get through as many questions as time permits. Please feel free to send in your questions via the chat platform, in the question pane in the GoToWebinar control panel, or simply email them to me at alex@investorstream.com.au. You can also download a copy of the presentation by navigating to the handouts pane in the control panel. The presentation was launched on the ASX a few weeks ago now, but you should be able to download it from that platform as well. Finally, a copy of the webinar will be available on Agia's social media platforms and website later today. But for now, I'd like to throw it over to Fernando, who's going to kick things off for us. Fernando, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alex. Good morning, everybody. So let's recap the presentation. We went through this presentation a couple of weeks ago, but I would like to just run this through, especially for those that didn't have the opportunity to see it the very first time we presented, but also to give us a little bit of a recap for the Q&A. That's going to be probably the most interesting part of our conversation today. So essentially our growing appetite and interest for the copper has to do essentially by the demand of the market for green energy. The replacement of fossil fuel and traditional sources of energy demands a lot of copper. It goes essentially into the wiring of electrical vehicles and the wiring of wind turbines and in the wiring of solar panel, which is a good fit when we think of environmentally sustainable projects. Next slide, please. This is our mandatory disclaimer, and just remember our management team is mostly based in Brazil, starting with me and my general managers, all residents in the state of Rio Grande. Next slide, please. Just to remind you of our track record, so we have been doing minerals exploration for the past almost 30 years. Me and my team have participated of several significant discoveries in the course of our careers. And what we're doing in the copper space here in Rio Grande is nothing that we're not familiar with. Next slide, please. So we are located, as you all know, in southernmost Brazil, towards the border of Uruguay. That little inset on the right-hand side just shows you all our assets in our portfolio. The copper ones are the blue stars, and obviously in the same region we do also have the phosphate. Remembering that the Rio Grande Copper Belt is an area of about 100 by 60 kilometers, where we have in excess of 100,000 hectares of exploration permits given by the mines department here in Brazil, and another 33,000 under application. Next slide, please. So this is a closer view of the previous map. So we're looking at the background map here is what we call the Rio Grande Copper Belt. So essentially all our copper targets are those red pins, spread around the area. And then the black ones are our phosphate projects. So the most advanced project in the portfolio is Andrade, and then Primavera, which is along the same trend, and then Carlota. But I'm going to go through each of these 6 targets, starting with obviously the most advanced, which is Andrade. Next, please. Just to give you an idea of what was done in the past and where we are now, and obviously there's a lot of work still to be done on Andrade and the others. Andrade, especially when we go into the EIA and baseline environmental studies, etc. Next, please. Okay, Andrade. So this is the photograph is an old adit. All the green material you see is exposed copper minerals at surface. The bottom model is our 3D model of the ore zone itself. Okay, it has an inner core of high-grade material, represented in red, and it's all wrapped up by an envelope of low-grade material. So there's a lot of upside for further drilling still to expand the resource, especially where those points where we indicate as it's open. It's open not because of discontinuity of the high grade, but of lack of drilling. So far, we have outlined a total resource of 22 million tons, of which 80% is indicated category and only 20% is inferred. And early this year in March, we have announced the initial economic assessment of the project, which were highly interesting. Now, next slide, please. Okay, just a summary of the economic data. So we're looking at an open pit mine, right? So the deposit is near surface, which allows us to open pit mine. Then we have the presence of chalcocite. Chalcocite is a copper mineral that carries 80% copper, and it's amenable to heap leach. The combination of this and existing infrastructure in place in the region, which is a mining region, allows us to have a very cheap project. We're looking at a capital expenditures of about 18 million. And annual EBITDA of 19 million. The total NPV post-tax is 108 million, a relatively short payback period, and obviously all these factors convert into a very expressive rate of return of 43.5%. Next slide, please. Just a little bit of benchmarking and to answer questions we have heard in the course of the presentations of Andrade. Often people think it's small. It's not the biggest copper deposit in the face of the earth, especially if you compare to those Chilean porphyry deposits. It goes in the scale of billions of tons. However, having said that, it compares very well with other very profitable deposits. On the right part of this chart, we have listed 2 deposits that occur in the Carajás region in the upper in the northern Amazonic Brazil that were explored by Avanco. And then Avanco became Oz Minerals. So look at Antas Norte and Pedra Branca. They have essentially the same copper content that Andrade has, and but we have a much better infrastructure. And above all, what helps a lot is the fact that we're not a flotation project. We have tested heap leach, and it has responded very well. And this is going to be reflected in the capital costs. When you're looking at 81 and 165 opposed to 18. That there's much less equipment needed in a heap leach project compared to a flotation project, right? And obviously, because of the low entry ticket, the rate of return is quite high. Another point is that the final product, when you go to leaching and solvent extraction, electrowinding, you produce not a copper concentrate, but copper cathode that has a bigger value added to it. Next slide, please. So we're essentially sitting on the red line. So past work was mainly concentrated in drilling and metallurgical testing. What we have to do now moving forward is to invest more in drilling. And the reason for that is that we have to convert indicated and inferred resource into 100% measured and indicated. So giving a higher degree of confidence of the statistics and of the ore deposit itself. By doing that, we will then be able to announce more precise economics that will obviously have to be preceded by detailed engineering and obviously all the EIA work that's still pending. Next slide, please. So this is what I like to call the we can go back one, please. The copper wheel. Where essentially this expresses our future view of what the copper belt has potential to become. So Andrade, obviously being the most advanced project, will probably come into production before any other of the regional copper targets. But then it can function as a hub, taking ore from these different projects that we have in the pipeline. So next, please. So this is what we call the Andrade Primavera corridor. This is a block diagram. We're looking at north at the right-hand side of the diagram and south at the bottom of it. So if you look at the inset that's expanding Andrade, the background color scheme is ground geophysics. The red is the good response, essentially a high chargeability and low resistivity, which metallic minerals respond this way. So if Andrade, we ran a test over there because we knew there was a known mineral resource that was drilled. So we wanted to see how the response of the IP would do, and exactly the shape of the ore deposit was outlined by the geophysical tool, meaning that this geophysical tool is extremely appropriate to pick up more potential sulfides along the trend. You see the same thing happens on the right-hand side with the inset of Primavera. The blue zone is the mineralization occurrence at surface, and the red zone is outlining the geophysical response. If we look at the next slide, please. This is a long section from north on the left and south on the right of that block diagram. Again, on the northern sector, you see Andrade, very well outlined by the geophysics and Primavera as well. And all these red zones where we have put these stars on top are potential zones that will have the possibility of being additional sulfides. So it's a highly prospective zone. None of these has been drilled. Okay, this drill collar that was shown here is only a proposal. It was never drilled. Next slide, please. Okay, looking at the bottom of that trend, this is Primavera. So the black zone on the right-hand side map is the occurrence of copper. Most of the results that we have, the most significant ones are from trenching so far, and we have found things up to, say, for example, in trench 11, 52 meters of trenches, grading an average of 1% along that trench with a little bit of silver credits. And there's a lot of other trenches with very good results. Next slide, please. Now we're moving to Calota. That's on the eastern side of the project area. This target was found based on the historical literature that reported significant gold results in what they called at the time as banded iron formations, and we decided to check the area. Obviously, we staked it first, and then very quickly in our scouting process, we started to find good copper grades at surface, like this one, where the first bullet point, 1.6% copper and grab samples, and up to 48 grams per ton gold, including visible gold every once in a while. So with these results, we then ran a systematic soil grid over the target, and a very nice copper and gold anomaly in soil showed. We then trenched these anomalies, soil anomalies, and we started getting, for example, channel 4, 30 meters up to 4 grams per ton gold. 4 meters included 13%, 13 grams per ton, sorry, gold, and it kept on going. So the next step was then, next slide, please, run a ground geophysical survey again, and where you see those circles with gold and copper, that's the surface zone, and very shallow. The geophysical survey revealed a plunging trend to the south that has a great potential to be a sulfide because of all the combination of data, right? So this is a drill ready target that we yet have not drilled. Next one, please. So now we're moving south in the belt, and this is a Canada target. This was selected by airborne fixed wing geophysical data. Essentially, potash, the channel that gave a very beautiful response in the airborne data. Potash is good because it's related to potentially related to hydrothermal alteration, and these things end up being guides to find copper. So we then went there and mapped the area, started scouting, and very quickly we found copper at surface, like this sample here, 4.3% copper. Next slide, please. Well, the next step was then to run an IP survey. Obviously, we did first, prior to the IP survey, a systematic soil survey. The anomalies just responded very nicely, and then we ran an IP survey. That's best seen on the next slide. In a cross section, so these are the red zones are the IP anomalies. They're flat laying, and it probably has to do with the geometry of the beds. But the dashed lines on top are the soil surveys. So the geophysical anomalies match the soil surveys, which is exactly what we want to happen. And these 1 to 7 are projections of planned drill holes that will test these anomalies. Next slide, please. Espaço Feio, again, a target selected by airborne geophysics. Scouting returned several good copper samples at surface, 1.5%, 2%. And the next stage was then to trench. Next slide, please. One of these good results. It's all hosted in sedimentary rocks, and so we had trenches up to 14 meters mineralized, grading an average of 0.76% copper, and up to 11 grams per ton gold. Sorry, silver. Yeah, so this is another drill ready target. We intend to drill underneath the trench. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So this is Ceval. This is moving further up a little bit. This is a structurally controlled zone. We believe it has to. It's related to the same fault system that takes us up to that Andrade Primavera corridor. Again, visual copper at surface. Samples returning up to 2.3% copper. Next slide, please. Lagoa Parada, this is the sixth of the first targets that we have. Again, related to airborne. It was a target selected by airborne MAG in this case. Field scouting, old school boots and hammer, brought us to these mineralized samples with up to 4% copper. All of this was announced to the market, by the way. Next slide, please. And these are two new targets that we have recently be granted by the mines department. It's also on the north west side, essentially a system of quartz veins with visual copper minerals, as the photograph showed, and this other one to the west, the east, that we just acquired as well, with visual copper too. We have these samples are in the lab right now, and the results are pending so far. Next, please. Next one, please. I think that's it. These are the references of everything that we spoke here. Back to you, Alex. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Fernando. I think that the first question, you've outlined the copper targets that you intend to test. How do you prioritize your copper targets, and which of them are at the top of the queue in terms of continued exploration?
Well, Andrade is obviously the top priority project within our copper portfolio. It is essentially, the easy way to understand this is that at Andrade, we already made a discovery. We already have an ore body that was outlined. So we have a resource that's JORC compliant, and actually at a good level of certainty already. As I said, 80% indicated and 20% inferred. And not only this, we have completed leaching tests at ALS Perth. So we have completed mineralogy work at the same laboratory in Perth as well. So we know the mineralogy, we know the grain size distribution of the ore, we know how it performs in leaching tests, we know that it performs very well, giving us a good recovery, and not only this, the good location, all that translated in good economics. So this is obviously the closest path we have to cash flow on the copper side, and obviously then I would say that the very corridor where Andrade is would be sort of almost the second priority, and then moving to Carlota, that's has that beautiful IP anomaly to be drilled, and obviously then we would advance progressively the pipeline of projects.
Thanks, Fernando. So just on Rio Grande as well, if Rio Grande is such a prolific copper district, as you say, and you can go into some pretty specific detail in that presentation on why it's so prolific, why has there been so little exploration there?
Well, it's a combination of factors, really, Alex. First of all, we had and we still have other copper districts that have essentially captured a lot of the attention of especially the majors. I would say Carajás, where Vale, Vanco, and Oz Minerals are concentrated, gets most of the attention when it comes to copper exploration buzzards in Brazil. In second place, district that wasn't that notorious until Euro Copper got in and started developing an old Caraíba Metais copper deposit, and so it's really a matter of focus and a little bit of herd effect in the market, but. Another point too is the prices of copper. We're essentially seeing a growing interest in the copper as a commodity, in that, as I said in the beginning, driven by the green energy demand. So with the escalating prices, the projects become more and more attractive. So projects that weren't attractive, say 20 years ago, now they are. So, but having said that, the Rio Grande Copper Belt has seen a lot of investments in the past 5 to 7 years. For example, Nexa, that's the exploration branch of Tolentino, made a discovery there. They're in the permitting process. I Am Gold and Amarillo have invested a lot in copper exploration. Amarillo has outlined 500,000 ounces a gold deposit near the city of Lavra. So the exploration is not that new in the area.
Thanks, Fernando. So can you just talk us through where the upside is from your perspective along the Andrade Primavera corridor, and How do Agea's assets compare to others in the region?
Yes, so really, we have, first of all, we have a 4-kilometer trend just between Andrade and Primavera, and it can get up to 9 kilometers if we go beyond Primavera, further to the south. And all this area has known resources or known copper mineralization. Not only this, it was surveyed by ground geophysics. So there's a lot of copper, a lot of IP anomalies that weren't tested, and there's a lot of space to accommodate sizable deposits, right? These anomalies, as I said, they're not sitting there alone. They're not only IP geophysical anomalies with no other indications. They're coupled with mineralizations, with soil anomalies at surface. So really, there is a lot of upside in this corridor.
So Fernando, in your experience, based on your previous comparisons, just how successful could Andrade be? And in terms of share price track record, I mean, what's the share price track record of the comparison sites?
Yeah, so again, let's look at the benchmarking we did in the presentation. If you look at a deposit that's almost the same size, for example, Antas in Pedra Branca, look what these were Avanco deposits, right? Actually, they prior to being Avanco, these were Noranda Falconbridge discoveries, which I was lucky enough to work. I worked in this Pedra Branca project back in the old times when it was still a Noranda project. So, but you look at the contained copper, it's very similar, right? So, but the right infrastructure, the right processing route, there's huge upside here. And these were company makers for Avanco that ended up being bought by Oz Minerals by a couple of $100 million, right? So for a company as the size of Agea, Andrade is a very expressive deposit.
So just on the regional targets that you've outlined in the presentation, how do they fit into Agea's overall copper strategy?
Well, again, as we were talking about on slide 13 on the copper wheel, really our view is that because Andrade is much more developed already in terms of exploration work, drilling, metallurgy, and all that, it will probably be the clearest and quickest path to cash flow on the copper side. And then obviously the projects, all the other targets will be progressively be advanced over time. And our view is that Andrade can work as a hub, taking ore from these different deposits that are all concentrated in the same area. And this will bring a lot of synergy, obviously capital savings, and in terms of construction of other mines. We can basically manage the open pits and then just expand one existing processing facility.
So Fernando, you've mentioned the concept of chalcocite in the presentation and in various videos that you've done over the past month. You've mentioned it in releases. Can you just explain more about the chalcocite present that you've mentioned? What is it, and what does it mean for Agea?
So can we go back to that benchmark slide, please? Yeah, so look at this. So we're looking at Andrade, right? Leaching. Then Antas and Pedra Branca, for example, flotation. Look at the capex, 18, and then we go to 81 and 165. Right? What determined this is the mineralogy, right? Andrade has chalcocite. Chalcocite is a copper sulfide that has carries basically 80% copper, so it's one of the most richest copper species. But really, the key is that it's amenable to leaching. So when you leach, you build a heap to sprinkle that with acid, and the acid's going to dissolve the mineral, and the copper goes into the solutions. You don't need all that gear and all those flotation tanks that obviously a traditional copper project would need. These are the two projects that the ore mineral is chalcocite. Chalcocite has 34% copper, and it's not amenable to leaching. So then you have to float, and then there's cost consequences of that. So essentially, that's the importance of chalcocite.
Fernando, can you just provide some more specific details on future drilling plans for Andrade? How much work is required to get a deposit that can be brought into production?
So as we were talking during the presentation, to get Andrade into production, we need, first of all, to convert the resource into 100% measured and indicated. Okay, that would take anywhere between 6,000 to 8,000 meters of drilling, according to our plans, to our model. So then, with the better statistic assurance of the resource, we could then move into detailed engineering. All this detailed engineering will subsidize or feed a more precise economic model. So that's the way to go. The first step is really to improve the quality of the resource, and then we go into engineering that in a better economic model.
So with Andrade and Primavera being so close together, is there any prospect of this becoming a massive deposit?
Not continuous, right? So the geophysics already shows that there's zones where the anomalies occur and concentrate, but obviously there's the possibility that this becomes a nice trend, and everything almost in a very short distance from each other. So again, we go back to that concept of having the hub and feeding ore from different zones, mineralizations close by, potentially. That will be essentially the concept in the corridor.
So, Fernando, how many additional mines are there in the area that are competing with the Aegea copper assets?
No, right, not operating. We have an old historical copper mine, and not any active copper mine in the area.
I guess the key question that a lot of the investors on the call would probably want to know is, when is Aegea going to start drilling these targets, and how are you planning to fund such a program?
Well, essentially, the drilling will depend essentially on our cash position. So the plan is that we resume drilling anywhere between the end of the year and the beginning of next year.
Thanks, Fernando. So I just want to just pick you up on something on the benchmark slide that we've got in front of us. Was Antas sold before it went into production?
Yes, it was. Yeah. Oh no, sorry. It was sold. It was sold twice, right? So when it was sold, Antas and Pedra Branca, when they were sold by Noranda to Avanco, they were not in production, right? They were only Avanco then did the heavy lifting to get this all permitted and working and producing, and then this was sold to Osminerals.
So with the legal proceedings regarding the TEP causing delays, what is Aegea's strategy for getting into cash flow, and how much more needs to be spent before the company is in cash flow?
Well, this is a difficult question. It will pretty much depend on the time of the court case for TEP. Again, TEP is obviously the technically the closest path we have to cash flow. Why is that? Because we have gone through all this. We're talking on the copper side. We have gone through all the conversion into M&I, and we did then a PA, we did a BFS, all the precision of the economic model, all the precision of the engineering, and on the side we have completed all the EIA and permitting, so until we got into this situation. But so obviously that it would depend on how long the court case will take. And Andrade, as I said, will still demand all the environmental and extra drilling and engineering.
Fernando, we've received a couple of questions about getting approval for the copper project in light of the FPP's action regarding the phosphate. How does AGEAR intend on approaching the permitting for Andrade?
Well, first of all, we want to do exactly what we did with TEP in terms of creating a environmentally sustainable project. TEP has great credentials. It's not it's quite uncommon to see a mining project that's going to produce an organic product and also have credentials as being which we are still pursuing, but and we believe we will succeed in certifying the processing plant in zero carbon emission, zero energy balance, and zero water balance. So the same approach we would like to take with our copper projects. For example, right now we're looking at options to test bioleaching instead of traditional leaching with sulfuric acid. Obviously, this would bring a huge benefit to the environment, and all obviously costs associated to the processing and all that. And ultimately, what I would say is that you know, the process with TEP, it's a matter of time. We're going to prove that we'll have the opportunity to prove that we have done a fabulous job, and this would be a good background for starting the copper permitting the copper, because we will then have proved that we do things the right way.
So just following up on that, Fernando, would you ramp up the copper effort while waiting for the legal situation to resolve?
Oh, definitely, yes.
So we might just bring Christina into the conversation if we can. Christina, if I could just get you just off mute for just 1 second.
Yes, good morning, Alex. Good morning, everybody.
Thanks, Chris. So can you just provide, this is probably a prudent time than any to sort of address this. Can you just provide an overview of the latest updates pertaining to the legal case?
Yes. Well, I think most investors would have been aware that last week we released the full English translation of our legal defence, and that is a translation, an exact translation of what was filed in the Brazilian courts. It's published on our website, and we also provided investors with a very concise executive summary, because it's rather a long defence, as you would well imagine. I would encourage all investors to read it. But at this stage, I could add a couple of points that I would like to emphasise. Firstly, there are no allegations of corruption. Secondly, FEPM, who is the equivalent of a state environmental agency who issued the first permit, is joined as a defendant and is involved in vigorously defending their own turf. And thirdly, the action is based on disputed facts rather than questions of law. And our published defence addresses all of the technical questions of fact. So for the non-lawyers amongst our investors, I think that helps to make it easier to understand our position. Look, as the matter's before the courts, it's not appropriate for us to comment further, but I would really recommend that investors take time to read the defence, or at the very least, the executive summary, And look, finally, I would like to say that naturally, as the case develops, we will be informing investors of all the steps along the way. So that's probably as much as I can say at the moment. But I think I would really just commend reading at least the executive summary, and you get a very good snapshot of our position and what's going on.
Thanks very much, Chris. I might just bring Fernando back in on this one as well. Can you just, either one of you, provide some clarity on whether there are other projects being challenged by the public prosecutor in the courts currently, or do you have any other previous examples to look to?
Well, listen, Alex, this situation, unfortunately, is not uncommon. It's eventually every mining project in Brazil at a point, and not only mining projects, engineering projects, dam constructions. Either the federal or the state public prosecutors will be investigating. It's very common. So we have seen this up with projects up in northern Brazil with the construction of the Belo Monte Dam. It's unfortunately it's becoming more and more common.
So with the legal case, has all work stopped on TEP marketing or testing?
Oh, not at all. So we continue to do a lot of technical work. So we continue with Integrar, which is the ag station that we committed to engage to do all the ag testing. So that's ongoing. We will soon be announcing some results on this front. We also have are continuing on the engineering side. In particular, we're right now devoted to improve our drying techniques. And although the processing flow sheet of a TEP is quite simple, there's energy involved, and especially drying the ore for the final expedition of it is one of the pieces that consumes more energy. So we're coming up with some very clever and different solutions. So, and soon we're going to be able to talk a little bit about this. And another point that we're progressing is, as I said, the 000 certification process that we're starting to apply with the North American Certifier Edge. So there's a lot of fronts moving on.
So, Fernando, how much has AGEA budgeted for the legal defence?
About 100,000 Aussie dollars.
What, if any, support has AGEA received from government or the local community with regards to the legal case?
Well, several. The city of Lavras continues to give us extreme support. So not only the mayor and the city hall in general, but the society, most importantly. Either through our fund pages or even through videos that they have recorded and published spontaneously and declaring their support of the investment of the project. And more recently, we were accepted by a federal committee that's led by the Mines and Energy Ministry, and what they have is a committee to rank what they call priority and strategic projects. This is a new development in the ministry. It came with an act that was published by the federal government in March, and we came out in the first lot of what they call the strategic and priority projects. So we came together with other projects, one from Votorantim, a big iron ore project, and two from Vale, a copper and an iron ore project. So I think it was a very good news for the project. And obviously, the idea of this committee is to expedite and help the companies to interact with the government and to resolve their problems in the course of permitting.
So, Fernando, how committed are you to seeing this all through?
100% is my life. What else can I say? 100%.
Can't get much more commitment than that. So, just stepping away.
Alex, I could say I absolutely endorse what Fernando says. I speak to him very regularly, obviously, and he maintains a very positive attitude every day I speak to him, and they are constantly looking for ways to improve everything that we do.
Thanks, Chris. So we'll just step away from the legal case for the time being. I think we've well and truly gone through that quite comprehensively, given the current status. So, Fernando, how much cash does Agere have currently? And you've mentioned that you're drilling 5,000 meters. What is the amount of capital required?
Yeah, so right now we're essentially sitting in the treasury of about 4 million Australian dollars. The decision to trigger the drilling program is subject to how long we foresee the court case going. So it is a little bit of a strategic decision. Obviously, we know we can't wait that much, but I intend to be starting this early next year, if possible.
So, Fernando, in one of the videos that you released last week, might have been the third video, you mentioned the idea of exploration being a process and how important it was to see the concept of mine that you'd like to build and whether it will be economic. Given your experience, what are you seeing with Andrade and Agere's other copper targets?
So listen, we have to advance, as I said, first Andrade, right? This is the shortest and cleanest path we have to cash flow. It's a very simple project, near surface, open pit mine, leaching. So it has all the positives, and obviously these factors are reflected in the very positive economic assessment that we released in March this year, and so. Essentially, we want to do this, and we want to also couple this with a strategy of making it more and more sustainable when it comes to the environment. Bioleaching, as we want to start testing, and we're already in conversations with a group here in Brazil that will do the test work for us, is key. It will be a positive game changer for us, and obviously it's going to be reflected in costs, and obviously we're looking at other options too, including pre-concentration, sorting, all these things. And but the key is that we have to do simple projects with low capex and with a high rate of return. These are the best projects for a company the size of Agere.
And just to finish off, Fernando, why should shareholders continue to invest in Agere as opposed to other copper explorers? What sets Agere apart in your opinion?
Well, but when you look at say a greenfield exploration project or any project, copper or any other commodity, right? The first question that you ask is there a deposit there? Is there past history at least of mining? And so yes and yes for Agere, right? But it's not only about finding a mineral resource, which we have, right? You need to know if that mineral resource is shallow enough to be open pit mining, or at least within a range that you can go for underground mining. In this case, it's at a good depth. It allows us to do open pit mining. But then you have the deposit. It's shallow enough to be mined. But then you need to know if the mineralogy is good. Is it going to process? Is it going to liberate? Is it going to have a good recovery? And so this is another point that we overcame, and we proved that it can be processed. The recoveries are good. Mineralogy is good. And then I say, okay, you got all those questions right to tick the boxes, and say, okay, where is it located? in the middle of nowhere with no infrastructure, or does it have infrastructure? What are the costs of transporting this to the port? Are you going to go to a small or a port that can go to the entire world? Are you going on a gravel road or a grave road, or are you going on a paved road? So all these questions are all positive. We tick all these boxes, right? We're not starting from scratch. We have a clear path to monetize at least one of the assets of the copper portfolio. We have ran the mineralogy and all that. We know it performs well. So, and on top of this, that's not the only asset in the portfolio. We have more assets. We believe we can grow the portfolio, and we keep a pipeline of projects over time.
Thanks, Fernando. We've just had one more question that I'd like to address that's sort of
Yes,
on that theme. So we'll ask this last question. So why not bring in a partner to fund the copper exploration?
Well, we're open to any negotiation. So far, we had a lot of groups with interest, but yet we have not found the ideal partner, either because of the structure of the deal but we're obviously open to negotiate a partnership. Why not?
Fantastic. Look, that's all the time we have for today, but thank you all for joining me. And I'd also like to thank both Fernando and Christina for taking the time to answer some questions, and Fernando for the presentation as well. As I mentioned before, a recording of the webinar will be on AGEA's social media platforms later today. But Fernando, before I let you go, do you have any final comments to leave with us today?
Just thank you all for the interest, and I can assure all our shareholders that we're putting all our efforts day after day to make things better for the company, and ultimately to have this reflected in the share price of the company. Thank you.
Thanks, Fernando. Christina, do you have anything to add?
No, I would just endorse what Fernando says. We are continuing with business as usual. We are continuing with our marketing of the TEP project. The team in Brazil are continuing to innovate, both technical innovation that's bringing about environmental benefits, as well as saving money on the project. So it's quite exciting from that point of view. And, you know, it's pretty much business as usual at this end. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, that wraps it up for us here. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Fernando. All the best with everything, and hopefully we'll be chatting again soon. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks, everyone.